We continue discussing the opportunities in Ukraine, and it is my great pleasure to introduce the moderator of the next panel, Katya Soldak, Editorial Director of Forbes Media International Relations. Please welcome, Katarina.
Do I need it? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. While we're getting organized here, I want to make a little correction. I'm the editorial director of Forbes International Editions. So that means that we have media partners in different countries, and I work with basically entire world except for Asia. That means Europe, Africa, Latin and South America. And I would like to invite our panelists to take their chairs. I will introduce everyone. I don't know in which order. Why don't you come out and then I will introduce everyone. And while they're taking their seats, I also want to say that with all the editions that we have around the globe, Ukrainian Forbes is one of the most impressive editions and top performing partners that we have. And during the war, that actually became a topic of a conversation in the United States and with my team, because people were just impressed that somehow, in a time when everybody thinks that all the business activities in Ukraine are stopping and nobody is performing, for some reason, Forbes Ukraine kept publishing, never missed a day, wonderful content. So that only proves, I'm using it as an example to show that Ukraine is very resilient. There is a lot going on in Ukraine that's going well despite the war. And this is why we invited this wonderful group of panelists that represent different sectors of business and enterprise in Ukraine. And I would like to introduce them. So we have Matteo Patrone, Vice President, Banking, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Why don't we give him a round of applause? Then we have Duncan Nightingale, Chairman of the Board, Ukrnafta. And here is Alexander Garkavij, Director of Railway Products Division, Interpipe. And we don't need to introduce, but Olena Kosharny, founding partner and CEO, Horizon Capital. So in the time when there are a lot of talks about reconstruction and rebuilding of Ukraine, but also a lot of doubt about how you do it in the time when the country gets bombed relentlessly and infrastructure gets damaged, we invited these panelists here to talk about doing business in Ukraine successfully over the past 3 years and to share their stories, any updates, any successful examples. And we would like to start with Matteo, who's going to tell us about activities in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. So let me start with a few numbers, indeed. And since the beginning of the war, we invested 6.2 billion euros in Ukraine, which is a dramatic step up from what we used to invest before the 24th of February 2024. And we invested these 6.2 billion euros mainly in 5 areas: energy security, infrastructure, reconstruction of infrastructure, but also infrastructure development, being transport infrastructure or municipal infrastructure, investment in the agribusiness value chain, investment in supporting the private sector at large, and investment in supporting trade, both import and export. Last year alone, we invested 2.4 billion euros, and it has been a truly remarkable year, both in the public sector and in the private sector. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually very glad to be here in the panel with Duncan and Lena, because 2 of the most significant transactions we have done, and probably they will speak about that, so I'm not going to anticipate too much about this, have been done with Ukrnafta and with Horizon Capital. And in the public sector, indeed, we have pivoted our interventions in the energy sector from support to the distribution and to the transmission network. In the past years, we have worked quite a lot with Ukrenergo on one side and then with Naftogaz on the other side in order to support them in supplying gas from abroad. we have pivoted our intervention to generation, in particular to distributed generation. And companies like Ukrnafta have been essential partners in that. But Ukrnafta being one, but another one being Ukrzaliznica, that has nothing to do with energy generation, but they have shown not only substantial resilience, but also ability to think out of the box and using their existing assets in order to implement distributed generation in their network. But we work also with a number of private sector companies in energy, Ukrnafta being one, but also with a German company called Goldbeck Solar, and we have invested in equity with them in order to build a portfolio of solar power plants in the country. And this is the first investment of Goldbeck in Ukraine, and this is absolutely essential. In the private sector in general, indeed, I think the landmark transaction, not only during the period of the war, but more general in Ukraine with the NJJ and having Horizon as a partner, is certainly what has made our year. And I remember our conversations, Lena, in Podil 3-4 years ago, and that originated that transaction. But we have supported Nova Posta. We have supported small companies, Esper Bionics, working in developing cost-effective prosthetic solutions for veterans and citizens in Ukraine, and we will continue doing so going forward. We have the support of our shareholders. We have obtained an increase of capital of 4 billion euros, which means that we have dry powder for about 20 billion euros. And so we will continue supporting the country during the conflict, which hopefully is not going to take much longer. And again, we were all happy to hear what President Trump has said yesterday. But we will continue supporting during the conflict as long as it takes. But we are very keen in supporting the countries also during the full reconstruction phase. And we will step up, certainly, our activities then.
So would you say that your investment strategy changed, altered by this war, or did you...
Well, it certainly has been altered by the war, but we are a counter-cyclical investor. So while before the war... So when I took over, we started investing about 1 billion euros per year in 2019. That was already a significant increase compared to what we had been doing in the previous years. In 2022, we invested 1.5 billion euros, so 50% more. In 2023, 1.9 billion euros, so still more. And last year, 2.4 billion euros. So the idea is that we will continue at this level, at least, and then we step up even further once the full reconstruction phase will start. And that is not because we feel safer investing when the peace is achieved. But it's because investments will be bigger. But we are absolutely determined to sustain the real economy now for a number of reasons. One is because it's going to make our job easier going forward. The reconstruction is going to be easier if we sustain the real economy now. B, because we want Ukrainians to stay in Ukraine, and for that, the real economy needs to work. And C, for companies to stay in Ukraine and continue being active in Ukraine, they need infrastructure, and therefore we will continue supporting infrastructure rebuilding and emergency repairs as needed.
Well, that's reassuring. Thank you. We'll come back to this topic, but now let's ask Alexander about what Interpipe does, what your area of work does in Ukraine. I know that some of the operational facilities are located in the territories that are too close to front lines, but at the same time, you seem to be doing well. So tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, first, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Interpipe is a metallurgical international company. We are producing steel, first of all steel, then out of this steel we are producing seamless pipes and railway products. Just to illustrate, because I think the picture gives a better picture. The previous one was the seamless pipes, and this is the railway products that we are producing in Ukraine. We are operating 5 production facilities in 3 Ukrainian cities, all in the Dnipropetrovsk region, not far away from the front line. One of our major pipe facilities is actually only 7 kilometers from the front line and is recognized as an active combat zone by Ukrainian government. We are a vertically integrated company. Basically, our raw material is scrap, so all the processes, all the manufacturing processes of our production are in-house, starting from scrap collection until the finished products that you see on these pictures. And these 5 facilities provide 9,000 jobs for Ukrainians in this region. We are very much export-oriented company. We export 83% of our sales out of Ukraine. Our domestic market is Europe. 50% of our sales is done in Europe. If you look at our customer base, we have railway rolling stock giants like Siemens and Alstom as our customers in passenger segment, in the freight like Greenbrier and Tatra Vagonka. We work with all the national railway operators in Europe, including German railways, Spanish railways. Basically, we have the ability to supply all of them, and we work with most of them. One thing that we are very proud of, actually, that you can say that every third, for sure, almost every second wheel on the freight wagon in Europe is actually made in Ukraine. So we are extremely proud of that, and we want to keep it this way.
Okay.
Yep. One very important thing for us, 13 years ago, when nobody yet was talking about decarbonization in the steel industry in Ukraine, nor was the European Green Deal in plans yet, Interpipe commissioned a new electric arc furnace steel making facility called today Interpipe Steel. You can have a picture of it here. The investment was $1 billion approximately, and it's still today the one biggest investment in environmental friendly investment in the steel industry in Ukraine since it gained its independence. This investment, which is ahead of its time, it gives us the possibility to be one of the most, if not the most efficient producers in terms of reduction of CO2, because we replaced a Martin-based steel plant with electrical arc furnace. So I think in terms of railway products, we reduced our CO2 footprint with around 47%, which is tremendous, yeah. And so we are basically ready for the European Green Deal, and we are also ready for EU.
Well, I can confirm that that facility is amazing because I was there at the opening in 2013 or 2012. It was really the state of the art, and I'm, not a person who's interested in plants and industrial facilities, and that was impressive. I also wanted to ask you, were there any months during the past 3 years when your production had to slow down or you had to, adjust because of the dangers of the war?
At the beginning of the war, for sure, we actually shut down the activity for a month. Mm-hmm. And after a month, we started to restart because naturally nobody knew what was going to happen. And we have a lot of gas furnaces and other possibly explosive equipment that could have been damaged. And for sure, we shut it down. And since March, we restarted and progressively increased the production. December 2022, we had an incident with a power cut for a couple of weeks. Since then, we are operating, of course, under very harsh conditions, especially for our personnel. and especially in our site in Nikopol, it's very, very harsh conditions. Even though we're trying to make to provide the safe working space, but
So
I will tell it later how we are trying to do it. But of course, the risk is still there, and
well, maybe it is a good moment to mention how do you deal with the safety.
yeah, one of the concerns is actually the question. One of the biggest concerns is to provide the safe working places. For sure, we have bigger shelters under each of our facility, which is fully equipped and operational. But there is not enough time actually for some people to get into those shelters. So we have actually put in place, especially in Nikopol, at the working station, a mobile concrete shelters. I have a picture of it, like that.
This is a shelter?
So if you have a drone or you have an artillery shell coming in, you don't have the time to go down to the bigger shelter. So we have put in place this kind of mobile shelters.
Oh, that's very impressive.
But that's not it. I mean, we are also taking care of the transportation of our personnel. We are doing the courses of first aid, tactical first aid, where we have all the material of the tactical first aid in place at the working space in case something happens.
Right.
So the company is trying to do everything it can to provide the safe working environment, but for sure, it can never be fully safe.
Right, but it looks like you adapted to the work condition and keep going.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. And here we have Ukrnafta, who also had an amazing journey, if I can say that, for the company in the time of war over the past couple of years. Duncan, why don't you tell us about what happened in the past 24 months with your company?
Well, thank you, Katya. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I feel very proud to be here using my 40 years in the oil and gas industry, not just to help Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, but also to provide the correct oversight at a very critical time for Ukrnafta. I am the chairman of the Independent Supervisory Board. The board is composed of 5 members, 3 of which are fully independent, one from Norway, one from the UK, myself from Canada, and then we have 2 other board members that are representative of the shareholders. And one of our key things is not just to build build Ukrnafta into a forceful oil and gas renewable energy company, but also to make and present Ukrnafta on the international stage eventually as a partner of choice, and to break the paradigm or answer the question of should one invest in Ukraine now or should you wait? I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But first of all, a little bit about Ukrnafta, vertically integrated company. We do everything. Exploration, development, production. We did go into the refining of the products with our refinery when it was operating. We still move forward on some of that importation of products, but largely we're able to cope with a large market share of Ukraine's needs and the needs of the military. We provide all their fuel, both in terms of gasoline, diesel, and lubricants. And over the last 24 months, the new senior management team, the new independent supervisory board has actually propelled Ukrnafta forward as a beacon of the future competitiveness and strength of Ukraine. We generated about 1.5 billion of EBITDA in 24 months, coming from, before that, almost zero. We contributed almost 3% in terms of the total tax revenues brought into the government, and we also contributed significant dividends to the shareholders being Naftogaz, and at this point in time, the Ministry of Defence. So again, all those funds in terms of dividends and taxes went into the Ukraine state coffers, which was a massive achievement for us. But having said that, we are at the point at the moment where we realize the energy industry in Ukraine is a critical part, not just of the economy now, but the future sustainability and growth of Ukraine going forward. So at this point in time, yes, we do produce a lot of the fuel for the country's needs, but 80%, or roughly equivalent to about 60 million barrels of fuel products, are still imported into Ukraine. That represents about $8 billion. That $8 billion should give you an indication of the opportunity which companies coming into Ukraine, especially in the oil and gas industry, can replace. So there's a very diverse set of opportunities. Ukraine itself is one of the largest, or has one of the largest oil and gas reserves in Europe. Naftogaz is the largest gas producer. Ukrnafta is the largest oil producer, but we do produce significant quantities of gas as well. So part of our diversification and growth, and to help the country as a whole in terms of its energy needs, and our own diversification and creation of value from the full value chain, is we're putting or creating a power generation business using our own gas, which historically, some of it has been re-injected for reservoir pressure to keep our production going. Some of it has been flared. So we're now at the point where we're going to be using our own gas for gas-to-power generation. Starting this year, we're going to be implementing 370 megawatts of new power to help with not only our own operational needs and provide stability, but if we or Ukrnafta takes less energy from the grid, then it means there's more energy available for the communities and the population to draw down from. Because we're all aware of the impact that the war has had on Ukraine and its energy grid. It's knocked out about 9 gigawatts of energy, and then there's about another 18 gigawatts that's currently under occupation. That's a significant amount of Ukraine's power generation capacity. So with all this investment that we're putting into power generation, I would like to take the opportunity to express the gratitude to the funding that's been provided to us from the governments of Sweden, Norway, USA, and Sweden, sorry, Norway, and the USA and the Netherlands. But equally importantly, in fact, more importantly at the moment, is the financial institutions that are international financial institutions that are supporting us. And my good friend, in fact, probably best friend, Matteo there, has been very supportive of Ukraine in general. As you've heard, large sums of money being invested by the EBRD, and some of that is filtering down to Ukrnafta to aid our power generation and using essentially our oil and gas, the traditional fuels, and taking the gas as a transition fuel and building that forward into the greener technologies, as I said, whether it be gas to power or solar and wind. The other point I'd like to make is that it's not just about the economic growth of Ukraine. It's lessons have been learned from the past in terms of having centralized power generation facilities. So now we're making sure that with the wind, the solar, the mobile gas to power, and potentially other technologies I'll talk about in a moment, we're making sure that we're moving away from that decentralized power system so that we have a much more resilient and threat-resistant power grid going forward. So really I'd like to, I've talked a little bit about the opportunities in terms of the power generation side, but at the end of the day, remember, from its roots, from its beginning, and where it's continuing its growth now, Ukrnafta is an oil and gas company. We are sitting on large, proven reserves and with a huge resource base. So talking about the challenges, perhaps, that we have, is we have more investment opportunities than we do money available at the moment. Also, given the current operating environment in Ukraine, it's easy to understand that certain Western technologies, Western oil and gas service companies are reluctant to come into Ukraine. So we need drilling rigs. So there's a lot of opportunities on the joint venture on the field development, production side. There's a lot of opportunities on the joint venture on the drilling, oil field services, modernization, expansion of the midstream sector. So that would include the pipelines, getting our refineries repaired and back up and running. And also, I think one of the big things is the ability to be able to do that is not just the funding, which is coming, but we need to increase that level of funding. And so what we're doing at the moment is trying to break, I would say, 3 choke points. The first choke point is the actual attracting of funding. And I don't mean this as a choke point in terms of what's particularly happening in Ukraine. This is perhaps a common problem around the world. And that is attracting the right level and the right type of financing. Now, whether that comes from national or international banking, or whether it comes from the private sector, we don't mind. But you have to step back and ask yourself, what can you do to satisfy the needs of those financial institutions? Because they are both driven by very, very different dynamics. For example, the private equity groups, they have shareholders. They're not governments. They're not strong financial institutions that have billions of dollars necessarily behind them. But they want to invest in projects that are sustainable. They have shareholders to answer to. They have rates of return that they've got to deliver as per international standards. So we have to, or Ukrnafta has to identify truly meaningful projects that can be invested in. So much money at the moment is going into green solutions that either are not truly sustainable or do not have the project economics associated with them that make them attractive for investment. So we're focusing on breaking that choke point to make sure that the money does come in. The second point is technology. Solar, wind, great advances recently, and it's more efficient, more profitable, but also with respect to the other technologies such as hydrogen, small modular reactors, and that type of energy production. The technologies there have still got a bit of development to undergo. Scalability, economics, proven that they can adapt to the situations that they need to be deployed. So we are looking at all those technologies, and we can't do everything at once. So to break that choke point, we're obviously having to go out to the market, bring in the technology, so we can accelerate the movement of going away from, but still growing at the same time, there are traditional fills, and moving that more into the sustainable fill development. And then the third thing would be timelines. It's easy to agree timelines for implementation of sustainable green projects and business development growth projects. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a great appreciation for what the project's going to cost, where the money's going to come from, secondly, the technology and the technology challenges that you need to address. The third thing that I would say that goes into that, to creating a solid, reliable timeline, is having a proper developed regulatory and approval process. So Ukrnafta is working with the Ukrainian government at the moment to ensure that we have all those 3 choke points addressed, to make sure we have the proper regulatory and approval processes involved so that we can get those projects implemented a lot quicker. So I probably am running out of time, but there are multiple investment opportunities. And what I would like to say at the moment about the timing of investment, I attended the dinner last night, as I'm sure many of you did, and I attended the breakfast this morning. And it was very evident there's 2 groups of people saying, yes, rah, 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 let's get in there and invest right now. I hope I've demonstrated to you by the achievements that Ukrnafta has had over the last 24 months that I subscribe to that. Getting into Ukraine now and identifying the projects or the sector you want to participate in is doable. And On the other side of that, there's the other group that says, no, we want to see what that peace solution is going to look like. We want to see what protection measures and guarantees are going to be in place. Well, I tell you, if you wait for that to be established, if you wait for that to happen, most investors will miss the choice projects that are going to deliver the highest rates of return, the most profitable projects. So if you are in that camp, and I appreciate that some of the private equity groups have a lower risk appetite and are guided by other regulations, then this is certainly the time where you should be getting into Ukraine, making the contacts, educating yourself on the processes, deciding what sector you want to participate in, and looking at the opportunity set. That you should do now. So when you feel more comfortable in the hopefully not too distant future, you'll be able to react. And I think with that level of support and understanding, we'll all be able to build together a much stronger and resilient Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Duncan. This is a very nice, detailed overview with a good share of optimism. So that's important for everybody right now. I would like to speak to Lena and let you talk about your achievements in a previous year or maybe over a couple of years, because we've heard that you had a pretty good, successful year in 2024. So tell us a little bit about Horizon Capital and what you've done.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be able to share this. I've had a few moderator roles, but it's nice to speak as a speaker and speak more about Horizon. And I was inspired when Matteo was talking about Esper Bionics, and it's amazing that you are making investments at a 1 million level and then up to 400 million plus that you're investing in. And people think Horizon Capital is this big 1.6 billion leading private equity firm in Ukraine. And we all started as a startup. I joined a US government fund at a time when there was a dream, an inkling, and part of me joining it was because I wanted to spin out and start this investment management firm. And we had different names, Vatra, Phoenix, thank God. Thank God we didn't go with that we said, you know what, we see Ukraine and opportunities here. We see this beautiful horizon. Let's call this company Horizon Capital. That was in 2006. And we are really proud that our funds now, we're at 1.6 billion. We have 26,000 people on the ground in the companies that we've backed, that we back right now. I mean, 94,000 when you look at all of the companies that we backed, 194 transactions through our funds. And really, this is 41 people. This is 22 investment professionals. This is a platform of the business integrity, compliance, ESG, finance operations, that platform that allows the investment funds to be raised and scaled up. So Horizon, Ukraine is our market. Ukraine is our market. We also invest in Moldova. That was the regional footprint of the US government fund, so hence we followed that. We were the largest investor in Moldova, one of the largest in Ukraine. And for us, we don't even get into the discussion, should we do anything? We never stopped. We never stopped. We were, for us, when the war started, and this is in 2014, we were determined to continue to bring capital to Ukraine. Since then, we've raised, 0.8 billion. We've raised 3 funds. We've continued to put capital to work. That's, of course, part of, Duncan, what you said. Don't wait. Don't wait for the opportunities, but also don't wait to build the relationships. The relationships with founders. We're typically the only investor alongside founders. Those relationships take time. Those relationships must be nurtured. Some of them, like Creatio, which did this year, part of our fantastic year, they raised 200 million, a 1.2 billion financing round. It was covered all over the world. And that was a 9-year relationship that was built so that we could come in alongside the founder when she decided that she wanted, Catherine Kostareva, she wanted a partner. So it's not only you don't want to miss out on the opportunities, but the relationships need to be built. The relationships with investors. EBRD has been pivotal, an anchor in our funds. Matteo spoke about this transaction this year, and Katya and I were going back and forth about what I'd like to talk about. We're proud of the 0.8 billion. We're proud that we raised the largest fund for Ukraine and we closed 350 million. We couldn't have done that without EBRD, without IFC, without all of the institutional investors who backed us. We're proud of this NJJ deal. That started with with EBRD, with giving us 65 million in acquisition financing so that Data Group, the #1 broadband cable that we controlled, that we managed, so that we could buy the #1 pay TV company, Volya Cable, which used to be 3 to 4 times bigger than Data Group. And with that financing, we ended up in June 2021 buying Volya, putting them together very quickly, realizing the synergies. And then I remember we were walking through Podil, walking around with our COVID masks on because we still weren't supposed to, even meet. And I said, Matteo, my dream is to bring this platform together with the #3 mobile operator and to bring in Xavier Niel into Ukraine. And Matteo looked at me. He did not say I was crazy. He said, that's bold. I like it. And that gave me that impetus. And then in December 2021, when we met Xavier in Paris and pitched him on the vision, he saw what the company was doing. He wanted to go into the Ukrainian market. He has a map in his office of all the markets that he wants to go into. He's in 20 markets, over 100 million subscribers. And this is a market that he wanted to enter. So when he came back and said, if you stay, if you're a partner, we don't know Ukraine, we need to be comfortable, we will do this. But then, of course, the war started, but they stayed with us. But key to this was that financing, the relationships, that we were able to go to EBRD and IFC and say, you know what? And I remember, Matteo, those first conversations. We need 435 million. I mean, it started off as a lower number, and then it became, a critical piece of the whole capital structure. To catalyze that investment, which Forbes named the deal of the year, that is a total 1.5 billion recognized transaction with the purchase price and the capex. We needed that piece, that debt financing piece. That was essential. So I guess my message today is that A, don't stop. Those who are not there, you do so at your peril. We believe this is going to be a 1 trillion opportunity, and taking a train in Ukrzalyznytsia into Kiev and starting to talk to people on the ground who've been there. Talk to EBRD, they've got teams on the ground. IFC has teams on the ground. Lots of private investors, a very robust public sector, private sector, investment bankers, lawyers, audit firms, and talk to people and forget about this perception that Ukraine is not open. Ukraine's nominal GDP was 200 billion in 2021. Fell to 161 billion. It's 194 now. It's back to almost 200 billion. Why? Because of the exports, because of the grain corridor, because the metals, the commodities are getting out, because of the good work that Ukrnafta and Interpipe and EBRD and the financing, all of that is essential for Ukraine's resilience. So from our standpoint, what are we going to do now? We've raised funds, we're putting them to work, we've put a third to work, we will keep raising funds. We will keep catalyzing foreign direct investment into the country. We know that our equity piece has a 10 times multiplier effect. Our equity piece as a firm that knows Ukraine, that has people on the ground, that is willing to put the money to work now, will attract additional catalytic equity and debt financing and can end up with a 10x multiplier effect for a project. For a company, for the founders that we invest alongside. The last thing I'll say, Katya, there's almost a misconception that Horizon is a tech investor. Yes, we are the largest tech investor in the country. But we started doing that, over 12 years ago, because we had this thesis. We looked at our strategy and we said, export is crucial. We need to have export champions in our portfolio, in addition to fast-growing domestic. So we've never left the fast-growing domestic. We're doing retail, we're doing consumer goods. On the export side, we're doing food processing, we're doing manufacturing, we're doing tech. But it's important to have that natural hedging, which hedges currency risk, macro risk, geopolitical risk, et cetera. So we will continue to do what we've done, and we will look for other ways to catalyze major foreign direct investment into the country. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. So we covered pretty much every potential sector, private, state, investments. I like what you said about building relationships, because there is a lot of interest in Ukraine right now from pretty much all over the world. And I often meet people who never went to Ukraine, have never been close to Ukraine, but they have these big plans to come and rebuild and invest. So what you said probably is the most crucial piece for this. You need to know the country and people, and then realities become more real. I even remember in 2014 when there were no actual bombs on the ground on most territories of Ukraine. People already thought it was super risky to invest in Ukraine, and now the situation is much worse. So I want to talk a little bit about that for those who, even though the opportunities are very obvious and very interesting, but what would you say to people who might see that the need to end the war, or at least to put it to some stabilized position, versus innovation, investing, developing? How do you balance that? And I think I want each one of you to say something about this. Your thoughts, anything within that, frame of thought would be interesting to hear. And Matteo, since you're closer to me, let's start with you.
Well, if you don't want to take risk, there is always an excuse not to do it. 2 months ago, I got a call from a private equity investor from Germany who was asking whether the EBRD would provide political insurance in Romania, given the geopolitical situation in general. So, your risk appetite could go one way or the other, and it could take some surreal nuance as well. I am of the opinion that, has been very well articulated by both Duncan and Lena, the moment to invest in Ukraine is now. Out of the 6.2 billion euros that we put at work in the country, we have not lost a penny. And it's not because we have invested in the public sector. Actually, less than half of what we put at work is in the public sector. The rest is in the private sector. Out of the more than 100 transactions that we have done in the last 3 years, 93% are in the private sector. And indeed, from $235 million to $1 million in venture capital-like investments. If you want to seize the opportunity and to seize the upside, I think Duncan put it very well, you have to do it now, because otherwise your choice is going to be more limited once, everything is going to be easier. And it's not going to be easier forever, and there is always a risk profile that you need to cope with. And in emerging markets, if you are an emerging market investor, you need to look through the cycle. So
well, this is a market that's in active combat war. So maybe we need a little bit.
Well, some part of the country are more risky than others, also geographically, and we can talk forever about the constraints, about the energy issues and the energy blackouts, and the fact we can talk forever about the risk around human capital, the lack of labor, and the employment of a number of workforce in the armed forces. But if you focus on the risks only, and you don't look into the potential of return, then obviously you shouldn't be in this business, in my view. And I would rather focus on the opportunities. And the reason why we have been able to support Ukrnafta is because there has been an absolutely exemplary turnaround, not only in terms of financial performance. That is actually a result of what actually Sergei and the supervisory board have done. There's been an exemplary turnaround in corporate governance in that company. If you had asked me 2 years ago, would you support Ukrnafta, then over my dead body? And what has happened in the last 18 months is absolutely amazing, frankly. And this is not an isolated case. The reason why we have been able to support Ukrenergo is because, leaving aside the small blunder last year, because it is never a linear trajectory, the company has been managed in an exemplary fashion for many years. And that indicates that there is an investment climate, an ecosystem in the country where human capital is absolutely fantastic, which gives opportunity for investment both in the private and in the public sector. The only, if you want to spice up a bit the discussion, the only point where I disagree with Duncan is you indicated two categories of investors and financiers, the private equity ones and IFIs, like, look, we need to pay our own salaries, so it's not that we don't care about returns, and that's the reason why we invest in funds like Horizon and maybe not in other funds. And likewise, Horizon doesn't invest in companies where governance is neglected. So there is a convergence of factors.
Okay, Alexander, do you have thoughts on this topic?
Yeah.
Okay, let's share them.
Yeah, besides the difficulties that we have since we're in the private sector and industrial company, I mean, we have the safety, the recruitment issues, but on the question between the war end and the investment, I think for sure it's crucial that there is an end to the war as soon as possible. But we as a private company and as Interpipe, we just cannot afford to stop investment, because our clients are private companies. They are evolving, asking for more technological products, enhanced delivery performance, and we need to adapt our production facilities, we need to adapt our products. So it's absolutely crucial for us to evolve and to develop and to invest. And I can tell you, for instance, during the wartime, we realized an investment of $60 million in one of our pipe facilities, the one that is the closest to the front line in Nikopol. And we successfully did that, even though it was not easy to get equipment and so on, but we managed it. And we're continuing to do that all over our product lines, whether it's railway or pipes, and we just cannot stop. Otherwise, we would lose our customers.
Of course, that makes sense.
And one thing that I want to say as a short message, that I think Interpipe as a partner and supplier on the European market have proven during the 3 years or 4 that we are able to supply securely, on time, high quality products, because for sure our customers can doubt that we can produce and the right quality of products. And I just ask to believe in us, to believe in Ukrainian companies, and to believe in Ukraine.
Thank you, that's a good message. Time actually flies so fast, we're almost out of time. So I wanted to ask you if you want to add something, or should we ask questions? Your choice.
Can I just make 3 quick points?
Very quickly.
Very important points. First one builds on what Matteo said, and that is best business practices, compliance and governance. A lot of the larger companies in Ukraine now have independent supervisory boards, and one of their remits is to make sure that the company has those OECD governing principles in place. And that's certainly one of my main focuses on the board, to ensure that happens. So hopefully, as an investor or potential investor, that will give you some assurance that that is being taken care of. The second thing is, I talked about diversification, integration, growth. And nobody really, I looked at people's faces there, nobody really blinked. Is that not strange for a state-owned company to be talking in such terms? No. It's normal business practice. I come from 40 years oil and gas, where building publicly traded companies, diversification, business development is key to the growth of the company. So why should it not be that way in a state company? So again, giving you an example of what is happening in Ukrnafta, we recently did a deal with Shell to buy all their gas stations across Ukraine. That's going to bring 100 additional gas stations into the Ukrnafta portfolio on top of the 600 we already have. So when I say we're fully integrated, we are, but we are continuing to grow in all those lines, in all those spaces. And the final point I'd like to make is there's a lot of discussion on boards and panels at the moment regarding SMEs, the small, medium enterprises. My message there is yes, depending on your investment profile, your risk appetite, great entry point, great place to start. But depending on your horsepower, the level of investment and the risk you want to take, don't forget the larger companies. The larger companies, and I'm going to talk about Ukrnafta now, has a proven independently by an international auditor recognized resource base. So you know the resource base is there. It has, hopefully by the results I've given you, a proven senior management team. And I would like to say a very strong governance-guided supervisory board. So my message is don't just look at the SMEs, also look at the larger, more established companies, because that could prove to be an easier entry point. And the reason I say that is because most of the larger companies have more opportunities, investment opportunities, a greater opportunity investment set than they do have money. So your price point of entry could actually be lower and have a lower risk than going in with one of the SMEs. So something for consideration.
Katya, I'll say this very quickly. Yes, there are challenges, but this is a historic moment, a historic opportunity to not only enter Ukraine, but also transform sectors. And we saw that. We saw that with the mobile deal. It wasn't just about backing Xavier Niel coming into. It was an opportunity to transform the communications, the mobile sector, and that's very important. We did it with insurance, Matteo. Remember when we were in Universalna, and then that AXA, the #1 insurance company, was being sold, and then EBRD helped alongside us to bring in Fairfax. They were already in a very small company, but then they acquired Universalna, our company, and then AXA's company, and they became #1. Now, they just did a war risk insurance product with Aon, which is doing $50 million in war risk insurance. If not that transformation that brought them into that position, then we wouldn't see that war risk insurance product in the way that it's being offered. So I would just say, let's all think about it. Let's all think about how we transform sectors, because this is an opportunity that, you know, we may not see again.
Indeed, that's a historic moment and opportunity for transformation. We do have time for questions. Okay.
My question to Mr. Patrone. Our company, Elgraf, is one of the success story of last year. Small but success. Thanks to EBRD, the perfect German printing machine now running in our company. My question very short. Could we run faster together this year? We have more and more program, because thanks to this investment, we now have a first time in history of our company, we have a 1-year contract with Edeka chain to supply packaging to Edeka. We need new technologies. Could we run?
Sure.
So the first thing they teach at the BRD is that you shouldn't negotiate in public. So I'm not sure I'm going to do that. But in principle, definitely.
Just seizing the opportunity. Oh.
You're being pitched, Matteo. You're being pitched.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? I was expecting a lot of questions, of course. Here we go.
So what I see in front of me are 5 visionary leaders that have really dreamed big dreams and, more importantly, made them happen. And it's absolutely inspiring. So thank you so much for that. How do we get this out to the world? I mean, this is extraordinary. Because, Duncan, there should be a lineup of people asking for you to be on their boards, do you have a sliver of time? Interpipe, like the gentleman beside me already said, do you produce those mobile shelters and can I connect you to my, contacts in Israel, And Matteo, I'm already thinking, what kind of deals can I put together? Because this is extraordinary. So how do we get this message out? How do we get this out? Because any ideas?
Who wants
What
to
we're
take
doing
that?
right now. We all go to conferences. We're all, giving interviews. We're all doing what we can, co-organizing houses like Ukraine House Davos. But I ask for everyone who's listening, everyone on live stream, get the message out. The folks who are from different countries, go home and let people know what you heard here. Please help us get the message out because Ukraine is open for business already. Invite people such as yourselves onto panels around the world.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say, I think we can do a lot more at home, in our home countries. There was a very important point raised at the breakfast this morning by the Vice Minister of Ukraine, was it? Yeah. And, she was asked about investment and the best way to go about it and what reassurances and how can we attract more. And she gave the message, and I'll give her credit for it, was go home, talk to your own politicians, talk to your own government, talk to the companies there that you think are willing to invest and act as the ambassador. Don't just wait for it to happen.
I agree. I mean, there is no magic bullet. We need to continue doing what we are doing, more of that. And yesterday there was a closed session in the Congress centers with President Zelensky, the major CEOs of potential investors in the country. And the message we passed was exactly the same as I passed today. We invested what we have invested, and we haven't lost a penny, so there is no reason why you guys in the private sector don't want to take that risk. And I gave an interview, going to your point, Duncan gave an interview to the Italian financial newspapers on Monday. I could speak about our potential expansion in sub-Saharan Africa, which is very important to us. Actually, the entire interview was about Ukraine and the potential of Ukraine and the fact that we're going to increase our investment to 3 billion euros very soon, and that the opportunities outweigh the risks in the country. Exactly because of the human capital in Ukraine.
Okay, Alexander has something to say.
I think, I'm not at all we'll talk about the investment. I think the two gentlemen covered it completely, but from the operational point of view of our, for instance, company, I think other companies that are exporting and have major share of export, well, you can understand that, let's say, the customers are kind of frightened. I mean, it's not that they're not supporting us, but for sure they also have shareholders and so on. There is, let's say, a risk mitigation from their part, either by reducing maybe market share from Ukrainian companies if they had major and so on. So basically, at least for us, it would be very good if we can have some kind of war risk insurance. I know it has been on the table for a long time, but today we don't have any concrete tools or programs that we can use, unfortunately. So for operational business, I think this is very important, at least in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
I hope between now and next Davos that we figure this out.
Yeah, I think we need to demystify a bit of that.
We need to demystify,
we don't have time.
We need to figure this out.
Yeah.
Because we can do much better, actually.
We can. There's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah.
Sure.
And you are the green steel company in Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's an amazing story.
Okay, do we have time for one more question? Is there anyone who wants? All right, go ahead.
Thanks, Matteo. And one question which was raised many times, and you did a great job with this bionic arm, which was really outstanding, small. How to address the small and medium-sized enterprise in Ukraine who have a lot of needs, and it's now only Horizon and just some private banks who are providing support to them. How to scale up this, because it's a backbone of any economy.
So one of the things we have done is to leverage the banking sector. And the banking sector is flush with liquidity. They are parking liquidity with the MBU. But they are risk averse. So what we have deployed in the last 3 years in Ukraine is a new product, which is portfolio risk sharing. So we take 50% of the risk of a portfolio of new exposures of a number of partner banks in a number of specific areas, quite often coupling that with some subsidies for new investments, green investments, or investments for the integration of veterans, or in particular sectors, etc. And that helps increasing the credit penetration. One of the data that the MBU shared with us is that through our engagement with the banking sector, we have fostered an increase of credit penetration for SMEs in particular by about 25% over the last years. Now, I can brag about that, and actually we are proud at the BRD about these things because it creates innovation, etc. But actually, it's not. If only one IFI can achieve that, the potential to increase the credit penetration in the country is huge. So more of that needs to be done.
Yeah, I would add that. I want to add about the equity, and to complement what Matteo is saying, the equity is important. We have Oksana Strashna, Oksana Stand Up, who now is running a $50 million SME equity program with the U.S. government fund, with UMAIF. We've heard of others who want to put money into equity for SMEs. So I think it complements very nicely this risk sharing on the debt, and then the equity for those obviously who are growing quickly, who may not have the collateral. Then the equity is there. So.
Well, thank you so much. The message that I'm taking out of this conversation is, yes, we all want the war to end as soon as possible, but the opportunities are there, and the opportunities outweigh the risks. Right? Okay. Thank you so much, Matteo, Alexander, Duncan, and Lena, and thank you